Welcome to the Clean Power Hour Live. It is Thursday, February 2nd, 2023. I'm Tim Montague. Check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Please give us a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify so that others can find this content. We are speeding the energy transition, one podcast, one interview, one news roundup at a time. And today is a special day because we have an awesome guest. We have Hanwha QCells, Scott Moskowitz on the show. And we have a major announcement. But first, I'd like to welcome John Weaver, my co-host and the commercial solar guy, to the show. Welcome, John.
Hey, Tim. How you doing? Hope you're doing all right. It's going to be negative 8 degrees here tomorrow night. So I hope it's warm for you, Tim.
It'll warm up soon. It's in the 20s here, and it's a beautiful sunny day. We're actually having a very mild winter. I'm ready for some more snow. I like winter. I like snow. But c'est la vie, right? Who knows? February can be very snowy here in central Illinois, and I like snow because I like to play in the snow and go skiing. But
Well, like this image I have behind me, which is one of my projects, is in the middle of winter. So wintertime skies are nice for taking solar pictures. So it's, winter, I don't complain about it. I like it. I like it. Scott, though, you're in Atlanta, so you're 50 degrees. Nice warm weather.
It's a rainy 50 degrees today, but I spent a couple of days in South Florida this week where it was 85 and sunny. So
Nice.
I've been a little bit spoiled the last couple of days.
See, solar people like sunny stuff.
well, before we dive into our conversation with Scott Moskowitz, I want to make an announcement that we have a major sponsor for the show finally, and that sponsor is Chint Power Systems.
Nice.
They have a headquarters in Dallas, Texas, and there is an Innovation Day coming up on March 14th. I will be there doing a podcast recording for all the installers and EPCs that come to visit their facility in Dallas on March 14th. So looking forward to that. Reach out to me, Tim at cleanpowerhour.com. You can check out all the news, of course, at cleanpowerhour.com. So Scott, so happy to have QCells on the show. There's a whole lot of news that you've been pumping out to talk about, and I'll let you decide what is the order of those things. But the thing that is driving this, like so many things now in the U.S. in the clean energy transition, is the IRA legislation. But what's going on at QCells?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Thanks, John. It's, delighted to be here. It's been a wild month for us as a company, and for me personally. I've been working in this industry for a decade. I've been with QCells for the last 4 to 5 years, and before that, I was with GTM Research with McKinsey for 5 years. And I think what we've seen since the Inflation Reduction passed is just monumental changes in our industry. We've gone from a sector that has always grown and done well. It's had its hiccups over the last couple of years, but it's really poured fuel onto the fire, right? The demand has already exceeded supply in this market for forever, and now I think we're finally seeing some of these big new manufacturing investments that this market so desperately needs, and hopefully some of these other policy issues clear up and get the kind of guidance that's going to give a lot of us confidence for the next 10 years. So yeah, QCells announced back on January 11th a $2.5 billion investment in solar manufacturing in Georgia. It's the largest investment in U.S. solar industry history of any kind, deployment, manufacturing, you name it. Since then, we announced a 2.5 gigawatt multi-year partnership with Microsoft to build and supply projects for them across the United States. Our parent company, the Hanwha Group, announced a potential U.S. investment in battery manufacturing for energy storage specifically. And then just yesterday, we announced a 10-year offtake agreement for U.S.-made polysilicon with REC Silicon, who is a company we invested in about a year and a half ago and are working to get their Moses Lake, Washington facility up and running by the end of 2023. So lots of huge things happening. It's been a really exciting time. Happy for all these positive changes within the industry.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. When you tally that up, 8.3 gigawatts of American-made solar panels are on their way via QCells. And I mean, the really big news, of course, is that you're doing this soup to nuts approach ingot to panel, which is very unique. So, John, what do you think about what's going on with QCells?
So the facility that's in Georgia will bring in silicon ingots, cut them into wafers, and then refine them into cells, and then deliver them to a panel. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So what we'll do is there's technically going to be two facilities. We've been in Georgia since 2018. Started making panels there in 2019. That was a $200 million, 1.7 gigawatt module assembly investment. And what we've just announced is two things. We're tripling the size of that factory to 5 gigawatts of module assembly and building a second one in between Dalton and Atlanta and Cartersville, Georgia. That one's the 3.3 gigawatt fully integrated facility. We'll manufacture the ingots, wafers, cells, and modules at that plant. Again, we are going to be using polysilicon from among other from the REC Silicon factory in Washington State. So it will be a fully end-to-end U.S. supply chain for that core silicon-based piece of the module. And which is, right now there is huge demand for products that are meeting that specification, primarily because one, we've all had supply chain issues over the last couple of years, and then two, the Inflation Reduction Act is going to have a domestic content adder, and it's not yet clarified exactly what's going to meet it, but presumably if you have a panel that meets those specifications, you're on your way.
Do you think the 5 gigawatts of panels that are assembled in the U.S. will count? I mean, this is an answer I guess we don't know yet, but will the 5 gigawatts count for domestic content, or will they get like a partial credit? Like, how obviously the product that's at the 3.3 gigawatt end-to-end facility will. But the 5 gigawatt facility, I don't think Moses Lake has an additional 5 gigawatts of polysilicon content. And then obviously you don't have wafer and cell facilities. So, might those panels count toward?
It depends, right? The Treasury Department has to guide what the interpretation of the Inflation Reduction Act adder is. The language in that bill is relatively new. It's sort of based on Buy America, sort of based on Buy America. Yeah. Yet it doesn't exactly explain how to calculate it. So they'll likely do that within the next couple of months. But my best guess is that their interpretation of this is likely that congressional intent is to drive manufacturing pretty far up the chain. I think it's more likely that we'll be able to hit it with the integrated capacity than with just module assembly. The Dalton plant is historically going to rely on cells that we make in Malaysia and Korea. And depending on how they calculate that, it's likely that it would only take that fully integrated piece together.
That'd be a challenge. Do you have any insight onto whether or not the Moses Lake facility can grow, or is that a couple layers away from you?
Well, right now it's coming from nothing, right? That factory has been idle since I think 2018 or so. The U.S. polysilicon industry has suffered for forever from just an absolute lack of customer base anywhere in the world outside of China. And so now with U.S. wafer facilities opening up, we've announced one in Georgia. Cubic PV announced a 10 gigawatt facility in they haven't specified yet where, but they'll be building 10 gigawatts of wafer capacity. There's, of course, been a number of wafer investments made over the last couple of years in Southeast Asia. There's really starting to open up a market for U.S. polysilicon. And so that factory is, again, it's been idle for a while. It's still a state-of-the-art billion-dollar facility, but it's going to be up and running by the end of this year. And that means there's a lot of people to hire, a lot of equipment to upgrade. But yeah, it's on its way there.
You're referring to the REC facility in Washington State, right?
That's right.
And just for our listeners, where does the silicon come from that then feeds that machine?
Yeah, so REC Silicon, both they and we, QCells, have announced a number of MOUs over the last year or so. Again, really taking a holistic approach to localize these supply chains and really get as much of it from domestic or North American sources as you can. So REC Silicon announced two MOUs, one with a company called Ferroglobe, which has a raw silicon manufacturing facility in West Virginia, and then another called Mississippi Silicon, of course, in Mississippi. So they will predominantly be getting it from those firms. Typically, the supply for U.S. polysilicon companies comes either from North America or Brazil. But yeah, it will be predominantly local.
Very good, very good. And tell us a little more about the partnership with LG. Batteries are top of mind as we, make the expansion of electrification of transportation. Batteries are, of course, a limiting factor. So how far back does the partnership with LG go, and what is coming down the pike?
Yeah, we don't have a ton to detail about it yet. We announced a couple of weeks ago a MOU with LG to build U.S. battery manufacturing. The location or scope or size of that is yet to be determined, but something that we'll hopefully see relatively soon. There's obviously a huge demand for batteries. They have faced their own supply chain constraints and cost increases, and we compete very, very hard for batteries with the electric vehicle industry. That's where the majority of them go. And so having a facility that is really dedicated to supplying energy storage projects is going to be, for us, really valuable. There's obviously incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act for that too, right? We've got a number of deployment incentives with investment tax credits, production tax credits. We've got manufacturing pieces, very specifically with what we call the Solar Energy Manufacturing for America Act, which is, it really is the Clean Energy Manufacturing for America Act. It's got incentives to manufacture wind, batteries, trackers, all sorts of inverters, all sorts of components necessary in this product. So, lots of exciting things ahead that should emerge from all of this.
I like that you call it the Solar Energy Manufacturing Act because, we know. We're all focused on what we do. But you're right. It does include everything. It has hydrogen. It has wind. It has batteries. It has cars. Heat pumps are included in there. Well, I don't know exactly where those types of the manufacturing pieces go, but there's a lot of different items in there. So it's not just solar, even though solar is awesome.
45X for the policy nerds out there. That's the
45X.
tax code that it lives in, which, there's a number of them that are relevant. You got 48 for the commercial investment tax credit, 25D for residential, 48C is another manufacturing credit within the bill. Again, there's so much funding and policy within the Inflation Reduction Act that, there are programs out there that people are just still looking to understand and explore. Billions of dollars of grants available for all various parts of the clean energy industry. So just lots and lots of opportunity.
So you mentioned something in the pre-show as we were chatting that kind of caught me, and it took me a little bit to process it because it was like two or three things together. It's like, oh, he's right. But you mentioned that the residential incentive, which is what you just said, the 25D, it's different than the commercial incentive for solar, and the domestic content portion of that doesn't apply. So homeowners are not motivated to buy domestically manufactured content, only commercial, utility, business projects. Then you added another layer, and this is one that's a really interesting nuance, and actually a prior guest on our show referenced something to this nature. And you said the fact that we don't have a residential solar incentive for domestic content leads toward third-party ownership. And I know exactly why, but I would love, because you, Scott, you're the expert on the show today, and I talked way too much. But if you wouldn't mind, tell us why that is occurring. And that's such an interesting nuance that you brought up. I'd never thought about that. But please tell us why no domestic content leads to third-party ownership.
Yeah, and John, you're the one out there building and really monetizing these credits, so you probably got honestly a better handle on a lot of it than me. But there is definitely an inconsistency in the bill between those two sections of the code as it relates to the domestic content pattern. And part of this was just because, again, a bill of this size, there's a lot of sausage making in there, and particularly how this one was sort of negotiated behind the scenes over the last couple of weeks before it was rolled out and then ultimately passed with no changes at all. This is just sort of how the cards fell on it. But the 48 Section 48 has the 10% domestic content adder. 25D does not, and that doesn't mean that homeowners can't take advantage of it. And if you're Sunrun, if you're an installer out there, if you are using a third-party ownership model and you sell that product with a lease or a PPA, you're always going to monetize that credit with Section 48, and there's not a size limit on what you can do to qualify for that. So,
and make sure people know why.
yeah, because they're bundling these systems, and these are commercial entities monetizing the credit, so they are taking advantage of that section of the code. So they'll get that 10% adder, and they can pass that on to homeowners through their lease or PPA. If you are a customer that is buying your system and paying cash or taking out a loan, you monetize that credit through the residential credit, the 25D credit, and that does not have the adder. And I think that doesn't mean that there won't be solar loans anymore. Some states, like my own state of Georgia, don't allow third-party ownership. So there is no, you're going to have to use 25D no matter what if you're in a state like Georgia. But yeah, it's going to, in states that have it, it will encourage some of the lease and PPA companies to provide further incentives to take that type of system. And that's sort of exacerbated too at the moment. We were talking about this before the show too. It just, these increased interest rates over the last year, have really, the market was sort of already kind of pushing a little bit more from this loan back towards leases and PPAs. And there's been a 10-year ebb and flow of this, right? Historically, 10 years ago, the market was 70-80% PPAs and loans from Tesla, or PPAs and leases from Tesla and Edison and others. And now it's sort of shifted as solar has gotten much cheaper and loans have been so pervasive. You can get, it's been the other way. It's been 70-30, 70% loans, 30% lease and PPA. And it's probably going to shift back towards this equilibrium given those two factors of increasing interest rates that, are sort of, it gives the commercial entities a bit of a leg up because they can bundle and get some more attractive financing options. But then, two, this domestic content adder will, to some degree, favor economics for using that section of the code.
And you folks, I've seen the headlines that you're one of the your modules are one of the top selling commercial and residential products in the United States, like 1 and 2, almost. Like, if not every quarter, whenever I see a press release, you guys are always in the top 1 or 2. Do you feel this could, are you as QCell attempting to talk to Joel Ossoff? Sorry, I'm terrible names. I read it more than I hear it. Are you pushing on him to be conscious of this? Does he have time to pay attention to such nuance of legislation? Is it worth it? I guess I see you slightly nodding. So then, yeah. So this is something that you guys are going to see if you can bring up.
It's less of an issue. I wouldn't describe it as an issue. I would describe it as an inconsistency. And it's one that certainly if I could snap my fingers and have this domestic content adder apply to both sections of the code, I think we would all gladly have that happen.
Okay.
I think we all have to be practical to understand what are the odds of that happening. The Inflation Reduction Act is passed. It's not going to be opened back up anytime soon. We now have a Republican House of Representatives. There's always potential that at some point there can be a tax extenders package. Those happen every couple of years, probably towards the end of the year, to clear the decks and extend some of these expiring credits that have really strong bipartisan support. The investment tax credit has historically had bipartisan support. It was extended, you'll recall, a couple of years ago. At the end of the year under President Trump. So there will always hopefully be some potential to get this type of equality within the code, but probably not a near-term type change.
And Scott, tell us about Microsoft, because I see that they're also investing in cubic PV. We've had cubic PV on the show. I think of them as kind of a next-gen solar technology company, but are they going to be producing traditional photovoltaics with this 10 gigawatt facility?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Microsoft they are not a direct investor in cubic PV, but Breakthrough Energy is, which is the Bill Gates investment and venture arm. And yeah, so Cubic has announced a 10 gigawatt wafer facility there. As far as I understand, those would be sold on a third party basis. But that's also still perspective. So like they, as in all of these major corporations, have huge renewable energy targets. And there was a report from the American Clean Power Association a couple of weeks ago ranking where these companies fall. Microsoft's pretty close to the top, but they are an enormous company and have really big targets. So we're helping them immediately to start solving some of those issues and getting as much solar and everything else they need onto the grid as quickly as possible. What is unique about that deal is it's one of the, as far as I'm aware, it is the first time that a major buyer of energy has procured panels directly from a supplier. Typically, they'll go to an IPP or a developer or some other entity that's going to build and install, and that company will do the procurement of the modules. In this case, we're doing it all for them. We will build these projects, construct them, supply them, and really work as a long-term partner to ensure that they can meet these targets. And I think that's just it's part of the new world we all live in, where we've had 2 years of supply chain constraints, we've had 10 years of supply disruptions from trade issues and other things, and for them and for us, it's just a good type of partnership to form. So, yeah, John, we are predominantly known for supplying panels in the residential and commercial markets, but we've been active in the utility space for a long time, and that's the type of projects that Microsoft will be installing.
So yeah, that's something that we need to talk about, is how you have vertically integrated and propped up a development arm now. So you are a full-fledged solar project developer, and I can see why, if I was Microsoft, I might want to participate in that directly. Historically, big corporates are just buying third-party PPAs. These are virtual PPAs, so they're buying the power from a solar or wind facility that's in some remote location, and then decarbonizing their value chain with those assets. Now, Microsoft is going to buy a bunch of QCell solar panels, and QCells is going to develop projects, or is developing projects then, that you will basically, is this what you would call a joint venture, or what exactly is that relationship? And then a second question is, does this jeopardize other developers' access to QCell's product?
No, good questions. We'd characterize it as a long-term partnership. They will be a big customer in several different ways. And yes, we have a pretty vertically integrated model at this point, which is a bit unique. There historically have been a bunch of vertically integrated firms in this sector. There's SunPower for solar, Symetis and others. And I think we've sort of come to this at a stage when the market is hopefully a bit more mature, and also just really leaning on the fact that we are probably more than any other solar company out there, backed by a diversified conglomerate, right? The Hanwha Group is one of the biggest entities in Korea, and also QCells, of course, is still joint headquartered between Germany, Korea, and also we've been, the US is actually our biggest market where we have our biggest presence. So that's sort of how we focused over the long term. In terms of what it means for the rest of the market, this is a 2.5 gigawatt multi-year agreement. We're going to have within 2 years 8.5 gigawatts of US manufacturing capacity alone around the world, where I think our capacity at the moment is well over 12 gigawatts. And so, it's a big deal, but we're still going to be working with a lot of different partners and have a lot of folks.
Gotcha.
So
Go
your
ahead, Tom.
U.S. development arm, that's 174 Energy, right?
There's in fact two entities under at least the broader umbrella. There's 174 Power Global, and then there's another entity that is the one that's working with Microsoft called Hanwha QCells USA Corp. And USA and the module entity are under the same general under the same general umbrella, work very closely together. But both of those entities are utility developers. USA is actually formed. It was predominantly an EPC firm doing all of the engineering, procurement, and construction work. And yeah, we do that. And of course, like on the residential side, we have financing arms. We've got software technology. We invested in and acquired Jelly a couple of years ago.
Yes.
Have been working with
How's
them
that?
on some commercial offerings for a while.
I covered with PV Magazine. Excuse me. and covered a 174 project recently, and in our research, we figured out, oh look, it's owned by Hanwha as a just going up the line. So I thought that was neat. Are you conscious? And this is me getting into the sci-fi whiz bang stuff, Scott. So sorry. Are you conscious of any perovskite work that's going on in Europe? And I don't know. Do you just know any of the cool stuff? Hanwha has via their QCell. I mean, so first off, for people that don't know, QCells is a German manufacturer, a German scientist group that the Hanwha conglomerate, which is a South Korean major, massive conglomerate, they do everything. They bought QCell a long time ago. So there's some DNA, European design DNA, and now QCell slash Hanwha, I don't know, I always mix up the names, but QCell has somehow tied into a European commission that's developing a perovskite solar cell. And one of the people that are in it are one of my favorites, one of your competitions, sorry Scott, Meyerberger, but do you have any cool info on, are we going to have perovskite solar cells tomorrow? I know we're not, but I just want to say it anyway.
Nothing that I can disclose publicly right now, but yeah, we've been working on tandem cells with perovskite technology for a little while. We've talked about that as part of our long-term vision and roadmap. And I think everyone recognizes that perovskites that have a ton of promise, they can add a lot of efficiency. They have really strong theoretical values. There's some work to do to get them to be durable and ensure that they don't degrade. But otherwise, yeah, I think all of us probably in this sector are looking at, at any given time, what's the next evolution of technology? How do we get these products cheaper, more efficient? What are customers demanding? What do they want to put on rooftops? What do they want to put in power plants out there? And so, yeah, we're always looking to explore those things.
I noticed you said you don't have anything you can publicly disclose. So how I'm going to interpret that is that, hey everybody, next time you see Scott, ask him about stuff that he's not allowed to publicly disclose. See if you can get some good information out of him. So, and let us know so then we can disclose it. Cool.
Anything else we should be asking about, Scott, that we haven't talked about so far?
Oh my goodness, I just joke all the time that there's never a dull day in this sector. There's always something happening, something changing, something crazy going on. So I think for now it's good news, and that most of it is pretty positive. So lots of exciting things ahead. Thrilled to talk to you and get to share some of the stories. And yeah, appreciate all you guys do to publicize it and keep folks informed.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here, Scott Moskowitz with QCells. We look forward to visiting you in Georgia and seeing those factories expand and come out of the ground. And with that, I think we will move on and say sayonara, Scott.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right, John. Well, that was very cool. Great to have a legendary manufacturer like QCells on the show. I can't tell you how many developers I talk to, developers and installers, who are using QCells. We used QCells on several projects at Continental, and they're just a beast. So great company, and it's great to see real soup to nuts solar panel manufacturing coming to the U.S. That is what is really exciting about IRA. And now First Solar has a true competitor, so to speak. First Solar obviously manufacturing thin film panels, totally different technology, and they too are expanding. It's time to get First Solar on the show. I think I've geeked out with them on their software that got bought by Terabase, but never talked solar panels with First Solar. We got bogged down in a conversation about sustainability, and they wanted me to give them 10 questions I was going to ask or something, and I could never digest all of their marketing material because they're very focused on cradle to cradle at First Solar, rightfully so, because the cadmium telluride is well known for being toxic. Cadmium is a heavy metal, and so you don't want that stuff getting out in the environment. But should we dive into the news for the next half an hour, John?
News, Timothy. There's always news. There's always news. I think it's cool that QCell's here. Customers seem to be happy with their product. They always seem to be delivered. I don't have bad modules. I appreciate that Scott jumped on here. The push that they had through their senator was very helpful and very valuable. The Georgia voters have really been an integral part of the IRA, and so it's cool. It's cool that Scott and QCell were part of it. They were helped to push, and Sia and Abby, and I can't remember Abby's last name right now. Goodness, Abby something. Abby, but she's
Hopper.
Abby Hopper. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Hopper.
Sorry, Abby, I forgot your last name. So I know Abby because I follow her on Twitter, and she always drinks Dunkin' Donuts, and she always takes pictures when she's behind a seat, and she's like going to Atlanta, and she's got to work, and so I know that a lot of labor, a lot of pushing, probably a lot of stress went into the work that QCells has done, and ASEA has done, and everyone else down in Georgia. And so anybody who's from Georgia, thank you for voting for your senators, because they were fundamental in us being able to get this through. And so many other things, of course. But, from a purely solar standpoint, invaluable for what we got going on now. So,
Totally agree. And well, let's get into the news. We have a story from Illinois, a couple stories from Illinois, and the first one
Hey, wait.
is
sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't need to interrupt. So CPS, you got the CPS people to work with you. Does that mean we can do some training on CPS gear? Because I, as a small-time installer, I'm having challenges getting certain gear coming up over the next year, and I'm told that I should be checking out the 25 kW CPS unit. So I need to get some spec pages and some documents, if you could, Tim, now that you have a connection. And hey, congratulations. This is my first time hearing about you getting a sponsorship. I just hang out with you because I like talking. You let me run my mouth and talk about solar. But now that you have a sponsor, that means you're big time. So good time. So good job,
well,
Tim.
and it's great to have Chint Power Systems as a sponsor, because I'm near their products are near and dear to my heart. We've installed many 125 kW Chint inverters here in the Illinois community solar market. They dominate the community solar market across the U.S. with their 125. Now they're pumping out 250 and 300 kW inverters, going after larger utility projects. So of course you can I can help you connect to their technical staff. Come to Dallas on March 14th though, and geek out with their staff live. I would say Dallas is easy to get to. That's one of the nice things. I have a direct flight from Champaign to Dallas, so I'm excited for that. And but yeah, best of breed 3-string inverters, and also getting into storage. So check them out, chintpowersystems.com. We will be bringing you a couple of, we'll be doing a quarterly interview with Chint and or Chint and their customers. So you'll see 4 sponsored episodes coming out on the Clean Power Hour, and then occasional product reviews or product spotlights or project spotlights on the live. So definitely please reach out to me if you are a manufacturer and want to get your product on the Clean Power Hour, bringing you to our thousands and thousands of engineers, EPCs, financiers, project owners, asset owners, IPPs. Please reach out to me, tim@cleanpowerhour.com, or just go to the website and fill out the Contact Us form, and I can send you our media kit, which is a beautiful document. So
That's
thank you,
actually a
John.
great idea, Tim. If we were to review one component per week from some random manufacturer, just 'cause sometimes it's hard. I'm still a small shop, so I know there's procurement specialists who just know everybody by the back of their hand, but it's tough. I mean, when you were working for a big EPC and they were an electrical shop, did you have to deal with procurement directly? And like, did you have like a connection at, say, CPS or whomever, or did you have somebody who's doing all of your procurement after it goes through your engineering team?
Well, it was a mixed bag, right? Because we were doing a lot of work for developers, and so the developers were often doing the procurement themselves. And I, Tim Montague, never got directly involved in procurement. It was the project managers that were doing the procurement, and then in collaboration with the procurement department at Continental. But so there's many layers to that. But I did always have an influence on selection of product, and there are many good solar products. Solar is a mature industry, and that's one of our challenges is finding the right fit and availability with solar panels, for example, right? You'll often have a brand in mind, but then when you go to actually procure some panels, you go, oh, well, they're sold out for 2 years or more now. Supply chain is a real challenge. And then you've got things like the tariffs on Chinese products. And so it's deep water. You've got to really know what you're doing. And of course, you want a high quality product that's not going to break and keep the solar array up and running. And that's also a thing. There can be a race to the bottom. Don't install the cheapest equipment. Install the best equipment because you need that energy. You can't monetize a solar facility if it's not running.
All right, Illinois.
All right,
standardizing laws.
Yes, we are. There's a story in the National Law Review, and the title is Illinois Enacts New Law to Standardize Local Permitting for Renewable Energy Facilities. This was Monday, January 30th. And so Illinois has passed Public Act 102-1123, which applies to wind and solar facilities. And the gist of this is to prevent local AHJs, authorities having jurisdiction, from interfering in the development of solar and wind farms or making it too difficult. It's quite easy to throw a wrench into project development by, for example, creating setbacks that are too far. And sometimes counties are trying to create like 1,200 foot setbacks from solar facilities. And if you do that, then it becomes very difficult to find the necessary parcel space because the landscape, albeit very rural, is dotted with farmhouses and farm facilities. And so if the county says, look, you can't build your wind farm or solar farm within 1,200 feet of a facility, then you have no access to the necessary space. And so this law is saying, look, Illinois, we're going to standardize this and level the playing field and set a floor. And these are reasonable standards. We're not going to make you live with a solar farm in your backyard, but we're gonna make it accessible because we need to make the energy transition. We're not going to achieve our RPS, and this applies to many places, right? Many places need to do this, John, because getting your project permitted is difficult enough. Period. But if every jurisdiction has very different rules and regulations, that can be extremely challenging for developers. So check out Public Act 102. It's a very good thing for Illinois and leveling the playing field for solar developers and preventing these obtuse rules that can really put a damper on wind and solar. Here in Champaign County, where I live, we have a wind ordinance which is very restrictive, and I'm curious to see how this plays out. We do have a large wind farm that Invenergy is developing in the southern part of the county now, but for the most part, we've been surrounded by wind farms on all sides, but not very many of them have come to Champaign. And the way this plays out, John, for local communities is that wind and solar are producing tax revenue for school districts, for example. There's about 15 taxing bodies in Illinois, but the impact of a solar farm or a wind farm is that the tax revenue for those parcels that are leased to renewable energy developers are going to produce about 10x more tax revenue than the farmland that is being left behind, so to speak. So it really is good for local communities. It's good for landowners. They're going to get more income. It's good for the taxing bodies, meaning school districts. You need money to run a good school. And education in the United States is a challenge. We're languishing on public education. We're falling behind in STEM education. And so the quality of our education is directly tied to the amount of money that we can put into our schools. And with that, I want to go to a second story from Illinois, and that is the Illinois Power Agency has launched what is called the Energy Workforce Equity Portal. And we'll put a link to the show notes on this. So it is a portal where individuals can post their information if they fall into a equity category. These are people from low income communities or people of color. And then so those are called equity eligible persons. And then equity eligible contractors can also participate by posting their job openings. As I like to say, human capital is a limiting factor in the clean energy transition, and we want to make the energy transition as equitable as possible and accessible to all groups, not just the wealthy elite, so to speak. So this is a very good thing. It's a cool portal, and it's a step in the right direction because, it's one thing to say to contractors and developers, look, you need to hire a certain percent of low and middle income people in your projects. It's a whole other thing to get access to that talent, right? And so there are now resources flowing into, for example, workforce training with organizations like CETA and Grid Alternatives and the IBEW. And they are really leaning into training many, many more young people in the trades to become solar installers, electricians, steel workers, carpenters, etc., the people that build the infrastructure that makes the clean energy transition possible. So this is very good.
A quick comment on your prior story about the county level jurisdiction documentation. And 2 states over from you, in Ohio, there's at least 10 counties that have outright banned large-scale wind and solar, mostly solar. A couple of counties have banned wind. And then 1 state, your neighbor, the fair Indiana, has also got some complexity and some bans, some local moratoriums and local bans, including state-level, very strong control by the fossils. So when I saw the legislation, and I've seen this Illinois legislation floating around for a few weeks, a month now, when I saw it, I wasn't surprised because it almost seems like you have to regionally consider what's going on. Otherwise, the laws from other states might sneak in. So this might have been a good push from the other direction to make sure that siting issues don't dominate and take over. So interesting law. I hope others on a state level start to push downward. So maybe that'll help. Maybe it'll keep helping.
Yep. Yeah, it's absolutely a good thing to create a floor for renewable energy development. It's going to streamline the process. It's going to give developers a fair chance, in all parts of the state. And honestly, it's not good for individual counties, for a few decision makers, a few residents who are anti-renewable energy to have such a big influence on the economy. Because if you have a moratorium in your county, that means your county is going to get passed over for all of this potential revenue that goes to the landowners and it goes to the taxing bodies. So yeah, it's a public good, and I consider this not just a very important economic phenomenon, but it is also a national security phenomenon. I guess that's the thing that to circle back to QCells real quick, we need to make more stuff here in the U.S., right, that we're using in the energy transition. If for some reason China decided to shut off the tap of batteries and solar panels to the U.S., we would be pretty effed. And they know this, right? and so we really need to lean into building rebuilding, I call it onshoring and reshoring our U.S. manufacturing, and it's high wage jobs. It's it creates so much more of a smooth ride for the clean energy transition, right? Having access to locally made products. You're not waiting for the shipments to come on ships across the ocean, which of course we're going to continue to do that, right? But 8.3 gigawatts is a real chunk of the U.S. market. The U.S. market is around 20 gigawatts, and quickly going to 30 gigawatts. So it's game on, but we need more QCells in the world.
I mean, we do. Actually, a great article for us to transition to is that China this past week, I think on Monday, put out legislation stating that their solar companies, along with other technologies, are not allowed to export them. And included among the things that Chinese manufacturers are no longer allowed to move overseas are technologies for the large silicon cells, the 188s and 210s, black silicon, and cast mono silicon hardware. And this is to make the ingots way back and early in the supply chain. And that's pretty interesting that now we have the Chinese who are saying, nope, you folks that want to expand and grow, you can do it, but you have to keep your base in China. And there's a couple things that are going to come of this. One is that others are going to react to this, and politically speaking, people will be like, all right, now it's our turn to catch up with the Chinese, because the Chinese have been developing this technology for a long time and are the leaders in it. But now it's going to evolve a little bit, and it's going to be interesting to watch. And then, nation states will react. The United States will react. Europe will react. So yeah, that's interesting. We do need more QCells. We do need more Meyer burgers. We do need more Chinese manufacturers too, because they're doing good work. But it needs to be a world thing. Specifically, this article referenced also slowing India's progress toward being a powerhouse, because India is trying to make it a domestic industry very strong. So China has other things to deal with, of course, than just the United States and Europeans. It's got the largest country in the world as its neighbor. And every once in a while they have little skirmishes on their border. So
second largest. China's still bigger, isn't it, population?
I don't think so. I don't
has
know.
India passed China? Could be. I know they're knocking on the door, but
it's a complex discussion that if you delved into it, you'd be like, oh, maybe. Let's see.
So this story was China bans export of core solar panel technologies in Asia Times. So check that out. We'll put a link in the show notes. Good story. And yes, China has a major competitor in India, and of course is trying to pull back on that sucking sound of the manufacturers moving their facilities to Thailand and Vietnam and Malaysia and Singapore, because the U.S. was saying, look, we're not going to allow you to buy product, or we're going to put a tariff on it if it's made in China. Oh, well, we'll make it in Thailand. And this is a common phenomenon. And it's good for the Southeast Asian economies, and very good for the clean energy transition at large, because the products are still very affordable. But at the end of the day, we really need this stuff to come back on shore to the U.S. And that was cool about Cubic PV, to hear them scaling 10 gigawatts. That's a big number of solar cells. So we'll have to see about getting them back on the show too, to get an update.
Standard mono cells, so not the perovskite plus silicon product they've been exploring.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not surprised. They got to get their start. They got to get their revenue stream going, right? Why not lean into some easier, lower hanging fruit, right? That makes sense. And then also continue to develop that next gen hybrid technology. So real quick, I saw this story that Tesla at Giga, Texas is expected to increase their square footage to 5.6 million square feet. That is one big number, John, for a factory. And they're planning to invest $717 million into an expansion. This is like phase one, adding 1.4 million square feet. So there's several waves of expansion headed to Giga Texas, and I am, I don't want to dwell too long on this, but I'm just a huge fan of what Tesla's doing. I can't wait to get my grubbies on a Cybertruck, and I'm not holding my breath, mind you, because they're pumping out the Model Ys and 3s as fast as they can, and doing very well doing that, right? So, yay for Tesla.
Yeah, and how do you have any recent detail? I saw a full burn or a full load of the biggest rocket. Do we have any ideas when the big one that's fully loaded is going to get launched? I
think
I'm not.
I think they're saying 2024 now. It's conceivable it's going to happen in 2023, but it seems like a stretch to me. An orbital test, is that what you're referring to?
I just want to see the big one get launched. I have no idea which one they're doing it with. I just want to, I just want to see things on fire go up. Come on.
Yeah. We'll have to circle back. I don't have my finger on that pulse. I just very occasionally glance at that news. It is an impressive feat, putting that rocket together, no doubt. And I forgot to mention that the Tesla Gigafactory expansion in Texas, that story is in cleantech. Tesla's huge expansion plans at Giga Texas, so we'll put that in the show notes as well. And we just have a few minutes, John, so we should be selective. What's the next story that you want to talk about?
I guess I would have a two combo if we have a few minutes. One is that for the first time in 2022, we broke $1 trillion invested in clean energy technology. We grew 31%. The total amount invested equals the total amount spent on fossils and everything, on coal, on oil, on construction, new facilities, on boats, on everything. And this is the first time, and expected to keep growing. But it's the first time that this has occurred, and this also occurred in a year when the price of fossils increased greatly. The amounts of revenues I keep seeing, the profits for Exxon and BP and everybody, it's in the tens of billions for every versus the prior year. And it's like, oh my goodness, tens of billions. But the green energy world is seeing investment now. More than 50% of this investment was made by China, and a huge portion of it was made in buying literal electric vehicles. So it's now we're starting to see the clean energy dragon, I guess, start to develop more. Now I'm also told this number needs to quadruple in order to be on our pace, on goals. Mm-hmm. But things like solar and wind are on pace. EVs might be on pace. I'm not exactly sure, but they're close. But $1.1 trillion was spent in clean energy, and that's that's a lot of money. So that's pretty
that
sweet.
Story was from Bloomberg. It's called "Clean Energy Sets $1.1 Trillion Record that's bound to be broken." That resonates. That we need to 4x that pace to really make the energy transition by 2035, 2040, because it is really game on to try to keep global warming below 2 degrees Celsius. We're probably going to blow through 1.5. I think we're at 1.3 already. And so if we could stop it at 2 degrees, that would be huge. It would be a huge feat. It's totally non-trivial.
Yep. And expect that number to keep flying, because just a quick adder article. Also on Bloomberg, they showed the amount of fossils that Europe was buying from Russia, and it went crashed through the ground. This is a Bloomberg article. Russia can't replace the energy market. Putin broke. And so they show the volume fall. At the same time, yesterday, we had an announcement from the head of the EU. I can't remember her name. But she said that the EU had completely gotten rid of their dependency on Russian fossils. and they did it faster than they expected, and they saved 250 billion euros. So they have the possibility to reorient that initial funding into renewable power in the U.S. And she used to our net zero industries, not renewable U.S., RE Power EU, pardon me. And so 250 billion euros was a number that the leader of the EU just said out loud that was going to be put into renewables, into clean energy. So this 1 trillion, you're absolutely right, it's going up, and it might go up by 250 billion euros just from Russian fossil fuel savings. So I thought that was perfect 1-2 combo of articles. Like, yeah, a trillion, and it's about to jump another 100 billion or something.
Yeah, it was cool to see that Europe has passed, from an energy generation perspective, right? Wind and solar have now passed fossil fuels in Europe, and so that the renewable rocket ship is launched, and it is only going to pull away now as fossils become less and less economical. That's the key, is they are not competitive economically. Of course, if we did full cost accounting and took into account the health and environmental impacts of fossil fuels, we would make them much, much more expensive, and it would happen even faster. I have an episode dropping next week, which features an article my dad wrote called "Old White Men Are Ruining the Future for Young People," and it's about the 45Q tax incentives in the IRA legislation, which is fueling further fossil development in the United States, especially what's called enhanced oil recovery with CO2. So there's these tax incentives in IRA to capture CO2 from smokestacks, from about 1,000 smokestacks. These are ethanol plants, these are oil refineries and chemical plants around the country, and then pump that CO2 in pipelines. There are 66,000 miles of pipelines that are planned to, among other places, oil fields where, historically what happens is they can only get 40 to 50% of the oil out of these wells, and then they move on because it's quote unquote not energetically feasible or not economically feasible. Now with the CO2 incentives, they're going to pump CO2 down. It is a solvent, and it makes it possible to get more oil out of those wells. So this is what's called a poison pill in the IRA legislation. So stay tuned for that. Next Tuesday, that episode is going to drop on cleanpowerhour.com. Well, John, I'd love to talk about Hyundai, but I think we should just wrap up and let our listeners know how on earth they could find you, Mr. Commercial Solar Guy, because I want more of our listeners to find you and do commercial and utility scale projects with you. You're building rooftop CNI solar, you're building residential solar with Whaling City Solar, and of course you're developing community or small utility scale solar projects. So how can our listeners find you?
Easiest way is commercialsolarguy.com. We have a contact us page. You can send an email. You could also email me at john@commercialsolarguy. I'm also on LinkedIn and Twitter a whole bunch, just John Fitzgerald Weaver or Commercial Solar Guy. You'll find me. But all over the internet, just type in my name. You'll find me. John Fitzgerald Weaver, Commercial Solar Guy.
And John is regularly penning stories in PV magazines. You can also find him if you go to pvmagazine.com, and you'll find John there. So with that, you can find all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. That's our website. Find the audio, find the video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and please give us a rating and a review. You can do that right on the website. There's a link for giving us a review on Apple or Spotify, and that's vital so that others can find this content. We need thousands and thousands of more people to become informed about the energy transition and the great economic opportunities that it presents. It is the wealth creation and wealth transfer opportunity of our lifetimes, and so it's a great good for humanity. With that, I want to say thank you, John Weaver, and let's grow solar and storage. We'll see you next week, John. Oh, no, we won't see you next week. We're going to be doing our episode on Wednesday, not Thursday. John's going to be on vacation, and I have Julia Piper coming on the show as a co-host. We're going to be geeking out on residential solar. That is one of her expertise. So you can look for a slightly different episode next week. But and John, where is it that you're going?
Costa Rica.
Yes, I love it. I've never been, so I look forward to hearing about that trip. So with that, I'll say have a great day, everyone.